Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Technical Working Group Subcommittee for the SFO Roundtable. And I'd like to call the meeting of April 1st, 2026 to order. Can we begin with a roll call and confirm that we have a quorum present to proceed with tonight's agenda?
Thank you, Chair. City of Brisbane,
Terry O'Connell,
City of Half Moon Bay, absent. City of Millbrae,
Steve Rinaldi, present.
thank you. City of San Bruno, absent. Town of Woodside.
Paul Gold, present.
Thank you, Chair. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. We'd like to go ahead and start. The first thing on our agenda tonight is for members of the public to address the subcommittee on matters not listed on tonight's agenda. Please remember that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes, and the subcommittee cannot take actions on items raised during public comment. Diane, do we have any members of the public who would like to make a public comment on a non-agenda item?
Yes, we have two virtual hands raised on Zoom, Miss Ann Schneider and Darlene Yapley. Miss Schneider, please go ahead first.
I apologize. Can you take the next speaker? I've got echo. I'm trying to figure out why I'm echoing.
Sure.
Y'all are echoing too.
Sure, no problem. Miss Yapley.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm pleased to highlight what I see as a best practice for airline collaboration on noise reduction with communities, based on more than 10 years of work in this area and reinforced by two examples that were shared at this year's Aviation Noise and Emissions Symposium, which some of you attended. In both cases, what stood out was not just that the airlines were involved, but how the work was structured. This was both at BWI Airport and John Wayne Airport. The work took place in small ad hoc groups of technical participants, including a few relevant airlines, the airport, and a few knowledgeable community representatives. Everyone at the table was hands-on, fluent in the procedures and constraints, and active working the problem. It enabled direct focused problem solving on specific procedures or how airlines were flying the procedure with clear objectives. And this led to tangible outcomes, actual reductions in noise. After many years in this space, that is the difference. If the goal is to reduce noise, the work needs to be performed in an ad hoc group, narrow and deep, focus on a specific procedure or how that procedure is flown, with the right expertise at the table. Not a generic approach, but a focused one. This is what we saw in these two examples and where solutions were developed and real noise reduction was achieved. You can watch both of these on the video of the conference. Again, it was the BWI and John Wayne Airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Schneider, would you like to try again?
Thank you. My apologies. Still echoing. All right. Number one, given that there still isn't any ground-based noise showing up on working group, what needs to happen so that low frequency noise, ground-based noise, is discussed in a consistent manner so that the people here that are affected by it can plan on coming to meetings. So that's number one. Number two, if it's going to take goal setting or work plan for the next year to finally get ground-based noise back on an agenda, which is supposed to be this technical working group, then please explain that so that there can be requests made to get this back as an item. The last I know, it was last June where there was a brief discussion of the study that came out, and there's been no further action since then. In that time, The FAA has changed the reports about how helicopters are going to access SFO, or at least the Coast Guard facility. Now, those Coast Guard helicopters sit above my house. 2 weeks ago, for an hour and a half, helicopters hovered over my house. I don't know if that's because of the new FAA on that, or if there was a burglar helicopters were trying to catch. There is no information on that at all. So a future request, given the FAA changes, is what's going to happen with the helicopters if
Program and heard from SFO regarding the feasibility of the proposed updates. Following several months of review and input from the technical working group, as well as members of the public. As a reminder, this effort began last summer with an initial discussion of the program, followed by a comparison of similar programs at other airports in the fall, and more detailed conversations at the December and February technical working group meetings. Throughout this process, the goal has been to take a thoughtful and comprehensive look at the program and identify opportunities to strengthen it in a way that is both meaningful and implementable. This evening, we'll be closing out that discussion with a proposed framework for the updated Fly Quiet program for the Roundtable's consideration. With that, I'll turn it over to Vanessa to walk us through the presentation. Vanessa?
So I am just going to give, thank you, Terry. I'm just going to give a really quick overview before passing it over to Bert, who's going to run through the program. So I first want to note that this item here at TWG is for discussion only. This is, we've seen this item several times at this point. So as Terry stated, we've been working on the Fly Quiet program for the past several months. We first brought the program to the full roundtable for review in June 2025. Then in October, we had HMMH, our technical consultant, provide a comparison of similar Fly Quiet programs at comparable airports. And we really use that as a information tool for us to base where we are with comparable airports. And then at the December TWG meeting, the group had an opportunity to review and discuss 6 new categories that were being proposed for inclusion in the program, with collaboration from SFO, of course. In February, which was our last meeting, we came back to you all for the 4th time, and SFO gave us a very detailed response. We walked through all of the comments that members had, members of the public. We walked through what was feasible, if things could be incorporated into the program. And in February, that discussion was really intended to directly address the feedback so that we can make sure that what we were proposing in the program was, it really reflected the input of the members and the community. So today we're going to walk through the Fly Quiet program. We'll start off by going through the existing, we're calling it Fly Quiet 1.0, the existing categories. And then we're going to talk about the proposed additions and updates for Fly Quiet 2.0, which also now includes a new community engagement component, which was a request from the Roundtable. And then we'll briefly go through the implementation timeline. So on the slides, we've also identified the impact of each category so that it's very clear why the category was included in the program and how airlines that adhere to that procedure will benefit our most impacted communities. So I also want to note quickly that some of the categories you'll see in Fly Quiet 2.0 are refinements of existing categories, are not entirely new additions. And in those cases, the focus that we worked on was really on strengthening that metric based on feedback we received. So with that, I will pass it over to Bert to go through the program.
All right, so just a moment, let me get into the system real quick.
Bert, I think Diane's going to pull up the presentation and she can advance the slides for you if you like.
What was that?
Diane's gonna pull up the presentation. She can.
Excellent, thank
Okay, perfect.
Still, let me get it on my screen so I can actually see it. coming in, if you wouldn't mind admitting me, Diana. Be great. All right, so the Fly Quiet 1.0, the categories are listed on the left side, and the metrics that we're measuring are listed in the middle, with the impact from these is listed on the right side. So fleet noise quality, pretty obvious. We're measuring the airlines, aircraft types they're operating, and the onus is to reduce the overall noise footprint of the aircraft using quieter aircraft. The next category is noise exceedance rating. Following on to the fleet noise, we're discouraging operations that produce noise level above established thresholds at the noise monitoring locations. These thresholds were set by using an average of the aircraft noise at the sites, and we look at those periodically. Some of it's measuring flight path compliance, and the other parts are reducing community impact. The nighttime preferential runway use, again, we're looking at encouraging departures over water, incentivizing preferred runways, trying to stay off of the peninsula as much as possible, and utilizing a different schedule during the quiet hours. The night is a separate layer of the quiet hours within that, between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. It's erroneously listed at 6 here, but that would be for the night. The other procedures actually start at 11 and go until 6. The shoreline departure, we're encouraging aircraft to make a tight right turn when they depart from runway 28. And those are the truckin' and the night departure procedures that do that. The named shoreline is carryover from what the previous procedure was called. Everybody still prefers to call it the shoreline for some reason, so we stick with it. And that's basically flight path compliance and reduction in the impact on the communities that we serve. Gap departure rating. So we're looking to have aircraft departing to the west from runway 28, typically the heavier aircraft going overseas. Those are the aircraft that we would like to see climb better and do good performance takeoffs. So flight path compliance again, and reduction to the impact on communities. The Foster City arrival rating is our newest one, and this one encourages overwater arrivals so that we can stay away from Foster City as much as possible. Right now, that procedure is in jeopardy based on the FAA's latest news they gave us this week. We are now restricted from doing visual arrivals, and we are now to do instrument flight procedures. Don't know how long it's going to last, but that is where we are at the moment. We can talk more about exactly what it is, and I'd be happy to share that with you. But the long and the short of it is, right now we're doing extended staggered arrivals, known as CASPER, Closely Spaced Parallel Runway Operations, under Joint Order 7110.308. So we're no longer allowed to do visual side-by arrivals. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, we should stop here and ask if there are any questions.
Is there any member questions? Please, Steve.
Thanks, Chair O'Connell. Just a real quick question regarding Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Real quick question. You had mentioned that you're no longer able to do visual arrivals, was it? And that you have to use instruments?
Yes, the
Can you-
FAA is insisting on instrument arrival procedures, and no longer are they issuing visual side-by arrivals. So anything that you may have seen in the past where two aircraft arriving SFO in a slight stagger, very close to each other, no. Best you'll see now is 1.5 mile stagger.
Got it. So it's for safety purposes why they're doing this?
They claim it's for safety. We're arguing that everything was redone not too long ago to make sure that they were safer. Under the old FMS bridge arrival, they were receiving as many as 76 TCAS, Traffic Collision Alert System, RAs, Resolution Advisories, a day. Once they made those changes about 3-4 years ago, they dropped to 2 a day. So that's a good indication that they're much safer.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I suspect that I suspect that this topic, we could probably talk about it the rest of this meeting and probably most of the rest of the next meeting too. So this sort of came out of the blue.
It
At least
did,
to us.
very much so. Like I mentioned at the last meeting, we were planning for this construction project. We've done a lot of analysis. We've done a lot of counting of hours and when we might run into problems and things like that. Started the construction project on Monday. The FAA was telling us that it might happen about that time, last week. And we're like, is it or isn't it? And how can we get a waiver, do whatever we need to do to continue operating as we need to stay at the higher operating rate, arrival rate per hour of 54. And Tuesday, they came in and said, no, you're going to be operating at 36 an hour.
So this is based on the construction project. That's the so it's not. I mean, is
No.
that a coincidence?
It is an ugly coincidence.
Wow. Okay. I couldn't quite rationalize that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when they drop two bombs one behind the other like that.
And the number goes from 50-something to 30-something, correct?
54 to 36.
54 to 36, which is going to have a huge impact, I think, going.
It does. It'll
You-
send us into a tailspin.
Okay. No pun intended. Okay. Thank you. I'm assuming that at the next meeting, this is going to be, this evening,
I'm
this is a big
hoping
topic.
that in the next regular meeting, we'll be able to have both the airport's staff here and Bert, who can shed a little more light on how they are going to deal and/or negotiate this going forward and how it may affect both their expansion plans and many other things that might affect airport operations and the resulting noise.
So I don't want to discuss it too much here at the technical working group. We'll save it for 7 o'clock, I guess, though it may come up then.
I think,
But
I'm
I
pretty sure
suspect
it will.
I would bet heavily it'll pop up again.
But what about the, I don't know if the FAA representative is here in this meeting, but she usually attends the next one. She's not at this one?
So she's not at this meeting right now, and I can say that we did reach out to SFO, and Doug and Bert both confirmed that we will get as much of an update as we can on this at the roundtable meeting. Of course, I think between SFO and us, we found out about this 2 days ago, so we weren't able to agendize anything, but we do have a report from the airport director where he talks about updates at the airport.
Excellent. Thank you.
In addition to that, we have reached out to the FAA several times at this point to try to get a presentation here, especially as the TWG will start reviewing the strategic plan, which is a 5-year plan. So we really wanted to see what was in the FAA's purview over the next 3 years, so we can kind of plan out our work according to what was happening at the federal and state level. We've gotten some response that there will be a presentation at some point. We just have not landed a date. So we're actively working to get our FAA partners back to the roundtable.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, please
All right,
continue.
so we'll jump on to the Fly Quiet 2.0. For the Fly Quiet 2.0, we decided that we were going to look into analyzing the Santana Due Standard Instrument Departure Procedure for no runways 28 right, 28 left. That is a departure that goes out to the west and then turns right, flies along the coast of the peninsula, comes back in over the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, and then goes either north, once out in the middle of the bay, or east. The whole goal behind this is to encourage aircraft to stay on the chartered procedure, as I just explained it, rather than taking an early turn, cutting back across the peninsula. So again, flight path compliance and reduction of community impact. Foster City early turns. The aircraft should be established on final at approximately 9 miles, which is just before Foster City. From the bridge to the runway threshold is about 6 miles, just so you get an idea of distance. And what we're trying to do by this is get aircraft established on final, out over the water, and then come straight on in, or, as we were hoping for, offset over the bay and be able to come in that way. The goal for that is to basically keep noise over the water. For a long time, we've worked with the FAA and Foster City to not have early turns over the city. And the FAA has gotten much better at it over the years. With the airlines in particular, they do allow business jets, propeller aircraft, things like that to come in over the city because they tend to use them as a faster moving piece that they can slip into the final arrival. I'm sure that's going to change now with the recent ruling, so we'll see more on that one. But the Foster City early turns, we should be able to stay with that. The Woodside Gate crossing, we've always asked that aircraft arriving over the Woodside Gate, which is known by the 3-letter identifier OSI, that they cross at a higher altitude rather than a lower altitude. As you can imagine, out there in the hills, it's kind of quiet, and those aircraft coming through can be heard rather well. So we ask that they come through higher. We ask that they come through as quietly as possible, and these are being measured under the Woodside Gate crossing. We used to have it on our website years ago, and I offered if we want to, with any of these, just put them on the website. We could do that. If you prefer to have it as procedure tracking, we can do that. If you prefer to have it as a report, we can do that. More on that later when we get into the niceties and finalities of this. Offset arrivals. Those are in jeopardy right now with the FAA's edict on simultaneous visual arrivals. But what we were trying to do is encourage the use of overwater arrivals. So runway 28 right, we would establish an offset approach that comes in on a diagonal and then joins up with the other one to be a parallel arrival there. And so that one reduces community noise impact, does follow preferential runway use, and reduces nighttime noise exposure. The stick gate penetrations, that one was a rather unique one. We took the procedure altitude of, I think it's 2,000 feet. We ran a gate, which is just a curtain in space. And as the aircraft came through the gate, which are supposed to, per the procedure, at greater than 2,000 feet, 2,000 feet or greater, we graded them. Well, all of them did that. So wasn't much of a real thrilling way to deal with it. Vanessa and I have been talking about different ways of scoring. One of them could be breaking it up into 250-foot or 500-foot increments. We'll have to see what works best, but just those aircraft that are able to do better with that. And then we could break it up by airline and aircraft type, because certain aircraft types we know aren't going to climb as well as others. So that would be other ways of looking at that one. We'll get more into that one later. The get vectoring, so we're asking in that one a runway 28 departure towards the ocean, stay on runway heading to 6 nautical miles, DME, distance measuring equipment. That means measured from the visual omni range of VOR navigation beacon in the middle of the runways to 6 miles, that aircrafts not be turning. We want them to stay on the procedure as charted. And that one will help with folks that are in Pacifica and Cities South. It's mainly the left turns that are a problem. And so we are trying to make sure that they adhere to that. The roundtable meeting attendance. So this is airline community engagement. We talked about doing a few different things here. One of them is obvious. If you attend the meeting, you get a point. With 6 meetings a year, max you can get is 6 points. And then if you offer the roundtable to do a presentation or some other engagement type item that would be beneficial to the roundtable or informative, you can get 4 points for that. And so you get a total of 10 points for doing one presentation and having somebody attend all the meetings. And I believe that takes us to the end of the Fly Quiet 2.0 list.
Is it possible on this last one that you talked about with the airline community engagement, the point-based system, and I understand that attendance and presenting would be, a reason to get points. Another way, and I don't know if this is possible, but pilot information. When they are doing outreach to their pilots to encourage preferential requests or less vectoring requests, early turns, if that's something that when they demonstrate that they've talked to their employees, to their pilots, that we could engage that as a part of the point system, because I think that while their public-facing, roundtable-facing information is good, I think if they're really concerned about the public's perception of noise on the ground and turning down that noise, it's more about engaging with their own pilots that are creating the noise to a certain degree. So I don't know if that's a way we could encourage getting more points, if they're doing more outreach within to their own internal system instead of just looking at us and saying we're doing feel-good stuff. They're actually doing stuff that could be more effective within their own organization.
If I may, my thought on the airline engagement piece would be for an airline that doing something like you mentioned, they would be briefing, say, the shoreline departure procedure, trying to stay tight into the airport, making that turn as quickly as possible, and when safely airborne within the FAA's guidance of how to fly an area navigation departure. So they would then brief all that to their pilots, but they would then come back to the roundtable and say, here's what we did, here's how we presented it, and here's maybe some handouts that we gave the pilots. And that way it would be informative to the roundtable that they would know that that airline is concerned and is sharing that information with their pilots. Over my years of being on the Roundtable, I've seen many different things done. Northwest comes to mind. They had developed a complete poster program. Gene might even remember this one where they brought in their departures profiles for the Gap, and they posted all these posters in their pilot lounges at all their airports. And they brought a few into the noise office, and we had a few on our wall for a while. But that was their way of briefing the pilots. And it was something that they kept seeing as they went into the pilot's lounge to get their briefings, to get their procedures, everything else. And then they would see it all the time.
Okay.
And it would sort of be ingrained.
So when you had said, and forgive me for this, but when you had said, briefing us, I think that I wasn't assuming that it was going to be briefing on what they were doing with their pilots and their education within. It was more education for us. And so thank you for clarifying that.
Cuts both ways.
Any other questions from the Roundtable members at this time?
Thanks, Chair O'Connell. Has there been any thought or consideration for awarding points to airlines for their performance over year? So let's say year prior they had subpar performance, and then let's say this year they finish with a great performance. Is there any type of points for that?
I'm glad you asked that. We used to have an annual awards program. And in the annual awards program, we had 3 categories. The first one is, and I'll give it the most nebulous one first, it's called the Director's Award. And so the Director's Award, we would take all the quarterly fly quiet scores. We would then take the interaction with the airline that we had over the year, and we'd write that into a briefing and then give that to the chair of the Roundtable. The chair of the Roundtable then would take that information and make a decision on which one got the Chairperson's Award. The other 2 are pretty much cut and dry. We have the most improved, which is what you're talking about. So we take 4 quarters of fly quiet scores, add them up, divide them by 4, and we have the most improved. The other one is the quietest flyer. So whoever has the quietest score will get that one. It's pretty straightforward on that one as well.
And so for this program, there's no thought or consideration to any of these 3 awards?
Vanessa had talked to me about perhaps going in a different direction. I'm fine with staying here, but I mean, it's the Roundtable's award, so if you guys want to migrate away, that's up to you.
So, the intention here at this meeting was to discuss all of the different categories and then make a recommendation for the categories to be included in the program. At our full Roundtable meeting in June, we'll discuss the incentives. So we'll have I'll have an opportunity to work with Bert on what we're going to do, what awards are going to be given out, and now that we have a little more direction on what we may want to do, we'll present that to the full Roundtable.
So discussion for a later date in June?
Yeah, and hopefully an approval in the June meeting.
Okay, thanks for clarification. Thanks, Bert.
No problem.
Yes, sir.
So, please, go ahead.
Is there an action item for tonight?
So tonight we were hoping just to get a recommendation from the TWG to move this item to the June full Roundtable. So there won't be another TWG discussion about the Fly Quiet program. I think we've reviewed it 5 times at this point with this committee. And so we'd like to move it forward with the final just a consensus from the group that we can move the item forward to the full.
Do you need feedback on which categories, or is this?
So the recommendation is for all of the categories that we've discussed today. So Fly Quiet 2.0 plus the categories from 1.0 that are already in the Fly Quiet program. And the only things that we have not discussed so far are the awards, which is more of a discussion for the full Roundtable to decide, is it 5 awards? Are we doing 3? And what those awards look like. We also talked about, Bert has been sharing some of the other marketing opportunities that other airports do with their Fly Quiet program, press releases, things like that, news coverage, just to get people and the airline's excited about participating in the program. So we'll talk about that in June.
So one thing I'd like to say, I think it's great that this Fly Quiet program is fairly balanced with departures and arrivals. With the side-by-side being in jeopardy for the offset arrivals, can we just make a preference that they use 2-8 left, since it's not going to be using them both necessarily? I mean, it was that we talked about that you couldn't do the offset during the busiest times as much, but now we're not going to have that offset necessarily in this exact moment.
If I may, I think we'd rather ask that they use 2-8 right, keep them further offshore.
I'm sorry, 2-8 right, you're correct.
That's what I
on
thought you
that.
meant.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, we already have that as an ask. That's in our documentation with the FAA, and they also have it, pardon me, in their standard operating procedures. So they brief that use 2-8 right whenever possible, to the extent possible, that type of language.
Okay. And then on the gap vectoring, when we talk about having the planes stay on the straight course for the first 6 miles before turning, are planes quieter when they're going straight compared to when they're turning? Or is that because
Depends on where
it's
you're
just
located.
dispersing the noise in a different way when they're making a turn?
In theory, you'd be carrying a little bit more power as you went into a turn, things like that, but also, too, somewhat directional. So if you're directly behind the aircraft and the aircraft turns away, then the noise would go away. It would be shared over here instead. So that type of thinking goes with it. And so I think that's another way to think about it, too.
So the other thing that I thought that might be good to have one more category, and I hate to throw this out there, but I think it might be important to have something that is related to the ground-based noise, where we have, and I know during this terrible time, flight delays are going to be a very tricky subject about how long flights are out there idling, waiting for their runway slot, and or using, when they're not on CPU power, so they're using their generators and run-ups. But I think having some sort of category in here, and I know we wouldn't have time to really flesh that out tonight, but I think part of our Fly Quiet program should be, you know, that low-frequency noise, that on-the-ground noise that's coming from the airport, regardless of whether planes are taking off or not. You know, even just when they're doing maintenance or they're, you know, doing their taxiway stuff. So I think that might be, I would really like to see a category, and I don't know if we had one in there before that might cover that. But I do think that it is going to be, especially with these cuts that may be happening on how many flights can come in and out. I mean, they talk about landing, but, you know, they have to land to take off again, so it's all subjective. So I think that ground-based noise should have some sort of measurable metric that we have in this Fly Quiet program, just to be sensitive to all of the communities and the different kind of noise they hear. So is there some program you can think of where we measure when planes are not on gate power, or when they are, you know, whether it's run-up time or that kind of thing, that we could easily insert this that would not delay it going to the next meeting that, as it should? And is there a consensus within this group?
Yeah, I was just going to second your thought on the run-ups. I think that's an important statistic to look into. My only concern on the run-ups is, you know, people doing that to make sure there's no mechanical failure. So I want to make sure that if we're going to do it, we're balancing it with the safety aspect, where we're not putting anyone, at risk.
We-
But I am concerned with that noise.
We do have a ground run-up program, and part of the deliverables with our system back in 2019 was a ground run-up report. So we just had a meeting with our vendor today, and our current contract period ends May 26th. And I told them my goal was to, by the end of that mod, before we get into our next one too much, have a report that works. And it would take advantage of our noise monitors that we have at the run-up locations, along with the cameras. And so we'd be able to associate the aircraft, the carrier, everything else, and report out on run-ups. We do that anyway in our director's report. I'm sure you've seen that. But this would be more of a tangible. You'd be able to see a picture of the airplane that did it. Not that you don't believe what we were giving you based on what we have, but we have seen times where a carrier gets out there and does a run-up that wasn't logged. And so this would be a way of having a hard record for it. So, or at least comparing it to what the airfield operations logs. Now, more on ground run-ups, they're allowed to do run-ups whenever they'd like, and we encourage that for safety. The thing that we ask is if you have a flight going out within 2 hours of, I think it's 2 hours, 9 a.m., or later is fine. Before that and after, I think it's 10 p.m., we ask that you call in and get permission to do it. But that flight should be departing within 2 hours. That's why you're doing it at that time of night. Otherwise, you wait till daytime. And so that's one of the other things that this would allow us to track a lot better. And we'd be able to report out on that.
I understand you'd be able to report out on it, but I'd like to see it somehow involved into this Fly Quiet program so that we knew where there was the compliance and where there was the will to try to keep things as quiet as we can. And even if we don't maybe quite have a measurable performance guide at this moment, I think there should be some policy written into it that we could put into this Fly Quiet program this time around, because I'd hate for it to wait another year to do that. Or
Like I
another-
said, I think we can have it by the time, because I believe Vanessa intended for this to start recording in October, November, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so the next slide is the timeline, but I think we do have about 30 minutes if we want to discuss this further in this group. This is the time to really do that so that Bert and I can have some direction. We can go back and see. So I think this is the time for all ideas to come to the table if we have
So
more.
maybe we go to our timeline next and talk about
Yeah,
it.
so
Well-
just, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just before you go to the timeline, I do have a question about so as I read that there's 13 categories here, right, in this? So you're our experts. They all sound good to me, but I don't know how effective they are.
Okay.
And so it would be helpful to know, I mean, I'm not so sure that you could fine tune them that much and rank them on a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 13, how good they are. But I'm guessing our experts know which ones seem to have results. I'm interested in effectiveness, nothing more.
Yeah.
I have no preference on any of these categories. I just want whatever we pick, I want it to result in a quieter airport for neighbors. And so it would be helpful if we knew which ones do you think are like, these are the 3 critical ones. These 3, they're window dressing. They may not, they may be nice to have, but of all the ones on here, it would be helpful to us to know that. I could guess, but I'd be wrong for 13 reasons.
And then 2, the other question that came up was, do we have Fly Quiet 1 and Fly Quiet 2?
Yeah, that's true.
Do we gut Fly Quiet 1 a little bit and take our cherry pick from Fly Quiet 2 and put it in and call it the new revised Fly Quiet, whatever you want, we can do it. But we were trying to think about that. I was thinking along your lines of which ones we feel are going to give us the biggest bang for the buck. And so, I mean, I've always liked the Foster City shortcuts. We've reported on that for years, and then it was decided, since it was a web page, that the airlines were doing so well, we didn't need to report on it anymore, so away it went. I also like the gap departures. We have a few different ways of reporting on that. The gap departure is actually quite involved when you do the math with it. There are 4 gates out through the gap, about a mile apart each, and we do it by aircraft type and destination. So if you have a Boeing 757 going domestic versus a Boeing 757 going international, the 757 domestic will perform better than the international one typically, as long as it's not a short hop international. But you know, typically a domestic does better than an international, considering the heavier load of fuel, more passengers, maybe more luggage, more everything. It's a heavier airplane, so it doesn't perform quite as well. And so we rate those, and then we see how well they do at each of those gates. And then we add it all up for the whole group. We've done this before where we've looked at it, and I've told you before, with Singapore and Cathay Pacific. Singapore wanted to see the numbers, and Cathay Pacific wanted to see the numbers to know why they were doing a little bit poorer than Singapore was. After lots of backing and forthing with the airline and showing them the results at each of the gates, it was like 20 feet that they were beating them, and they couldn't figure out why. Same airframe, same everything, different engine type, which ended up being the cause. It was the Rolls-Royce engines on Cathay Pacific versus the Pratt & Whitney on the others. And they were shocked. So much so that they ended up buying Pratt & Whitney powered 747s to put on the route.
Can I also just jump in quickly? So the discussion about impact was something that I was very keened into also, which is why I tried to go in and identify what the impacts would be to the communities for each category. Because we're doing all this work, and if it's not going to make a difference, it's no reason for us to have the program. And the point of reviewing it and to offer changes is so that it is a more impactful and robust program. So when Bert and I talked, I think the idea was that instead of totally scrapping 1.0, we would keep a majority of the categories that were in that program and then add these additional categories. So it really incentivizes the airlines to fly quieter in multiple different ways. So instead of going from 6, they have 13 ways to get these points. They have 13 ways to fly quieter. There was a lot of discussion about the stick procedure. And so I think it was a universally achieved metric. So all of the airlines, majority of the time, were reaching and I may be saying this incorrectly, Bert, you can correct me, but we're reaching the correct altitude before they hit the waypoint. And so we discussed how we can really make that measurable and more impactful. So is it speed? Is it how fast they get there? And we know that depending on the aircraft type and how heavy, it's different for different types of aircrafts. So, and I just say that to emphasize that we did really take a look at what would make a good impact and what would be something that assists our communities who are affected. And so I do think that the ground-based noise is a good suggestion. If we have any more direction from you all, Bert and I can go back and we can come up with something to
I would
present.
really like to see if we have any members of the community that'd like to weigh in on the discussion so far.
We do have hand raised.
Yes.
Great, I
We have-
think we should do that now to see.
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 virtual hand raised on Zoom. Ms. Schneider, followed by Ms. Yapley. Ms. Schneider, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair O'Connell, for remembering ground-based noise. In general, the Fly Quiet report means absolutely nothing to the people living in Millbrae and those impacted by low-frequency noise in Hillsborough and Burlingame. There's not a metric in there that means anything, but what Chair O'Connell said is a beginning. But I will remind you all that run-ups are different from the amount of time that a plane is running its APU at the gates versus how much time they spend on the taxiways. Then something that has never happened, which we talked about years ago on the ground-based program, is that different airplanes have different low-frequency noises, or at least different sounds when they're on the ground. There is a particular airplane, and I don't know what it is, that has a very loud, high-piercing, sitting on idle sound, and it can often sit out there on the runway for 20 to 30 minutes. It is not a run-up. I've done the checking. So if you're going to rush this to the roundtable in June, which sadly I'm going to be on the boat in the middle of the Pacific, I will miss that. You need real specific metrics for ground-based noise. Run-up is one, but it is entirely different. It is taxiways. It's time at the gate, which also means how much jet fuel is missing on there. It is the runway that they use. And the big problem is when Bert mentions airlines, I think we're talking only commercial airlines. What about Amazon? What about UPS? What about these cargo flights versus passenger flights? And then what are the emergency flights, which all of us would give a wave of support for emergency, but who are they? And with the FAA changes, with helicopters, having helicopters go in a holding pattern before they can come in, we need to know that. Then what about air taxis, drones, and all the new stuff? But Terry's in the beginning, but you're a long way from having anything that acknowledges that there is noise on the ground at the airport. Thank you. Oh, the last one I would say, Bert brought up long haul versus short haul. It would be nice to know which of those are long haul, short haul. And if they're long haul, maybe they don't take off at midnight. Maybe they take off at 9 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Schneider. Ms. Yapley, please go ahead.
Thank you for developing the updated program. I appreciate the effort and the improvement. I hope to provide better comments on categories and metrics for effectiveness. However, the materials were not available in advance. A version was posted last week and then removed. I recognize this has been on the TWG more than 5 times, but this is the first time there's been a specific proposal with no advance access to review thoughtfully, and it does take me time to review this. In addition to arrivals and departures, a balanced program considers different distances from the airport, and I did not see ground-based noise, as well as a need for more time to look at airframe noise or factors such as speed breaks. It also should be clear to all roundtable members which of these affect your geographic area, and have we represented the roundtable members sufficiently or adequately. The impact column is high level, and we also need member-specific areas. The structure should incentivize improvement, encouraging airlines to reduce noise over time, not just rewarding those that are performing well. It should emphasize nighttime events and appropriately weights differences between large and small carriers, because high-volume airlines make a meaningful difference for communities. The focus should be on meaningful airline actions, which is what Chair O'Connell's comment was about. I think the wording right now just sounds like meeting attendance. Consider today's input: tuned or added language on ground-based noise, airline language for inclusion, time to review metrics so that we know this is really reducing noise, analyze roundtable member coverage. We need to perform a thoughtful review. I can't do it by seeing this for 10 minutes. Don't rush it. Ann's comment on cargo is spot on. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other virtual hands raised on Zoom or in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Through the chair, if I may,
please.
air carriers does include cargo.
Okay, great. So,
Also, just to add, I do think that it would be a great idea to add the areas of the county that each metrics affects, so we can make sure to include that if this moves forward in June.
So perhaps when we come back to the entire group, unless it comes again to this one, we would have a map of the Bay Area and say, you know, you'd color code what performance indicators are affecting or may affect or at least are measuring what geographical location. You know, and some of them may affect many, and some may affect few. But I think it's all very good, and I don't think that these titles that we're putting on the program necessarily define the metrics that are going to be used when we really get into how we're measuring these categories. Is that correct? That's something that the airport is going to have to look at to see how they are implementing the measurement of these things. These categories are not going to be written in such great detail at our level to really show all the metrics that are going to be used in getting a final report and an average that HMMH may be involved in or your office is involved in. Is that correct? Or is my question too convoluted?
I think you're in the ballpark. Let's put it there. There are some nuances that will still need to be talked about, still need to be figured out as far as where we're going with it. I would like to have those to present to the roundtable with where we're going with it. The other one that I would like to figure out is if we're going to stay with the bar chart that we have right now, where if you look at it, all you see is tapes for each of the airlines and how well they scored. Or do we want to have more graphic based on top 10, bottom 5 type things? We've done that before in the past. That was very successful prior to COVID. We presented that at the roundtable rather than present that page with the bars on it. That just is too much data, obviously, to see on these screens. You saw earlier that it's hard to read a presentation on these screens. And back then, we presented it on the projection screen. And it was a little bit larger, and it helped, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all of it. So we can work with HMMH, work with our consultants, see if we can come up with some ideas. We have some pretty sharp people. Greg Maxwell, who's done a lot of reporting work for Philadelphia and some of the other airports like Portland, and he's one of our consultants now. So we may be able to get something there.
And this might be a question that's to many of you in the room who might have been at the recent noise conference. Was there anything from that that you could bring to this conversation? I know that in the initial comments that one of our phone participants mentioned some work that was being done at, I want to say John Wayne and at VWI, and some of the metrics they were using that seem to be effective for those communities. And I'm wondering if there's any feedback that anyone who's attended that could actually, you know, make a comment about, and maybe it would be informative and maybe it won't, but we'll see.
Yeah, thanks, Chair O'Connell. Just real quickly, while I was at that conference, There was plenty of different topics, noise obviously being one of them, but one of the more interesting things that I heard about and was invited to afterwards was a roundtable of roundtables by Quiet Communities, Quiet American Skies program.
Mhm.
And Bert, I don't know if you're familiar with this group, but it's composed of airports like the LAX Community Noise Roundtable, Chicago O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission, Boston's Mass Airport Community Advisory Committee, so on and so forth, with their overall goal being best practices and information share to help reduce noise around airports. So I don't know if that'd be someone or a group, or if we have any representation. It sounded as if SFO didn't have any representation within that group.
No, that's for roundtables such as yourselves.
Sure.
So airports, we're actually in the next room having a noise control officers meeting. So we were busy talking about how we deal with what we deal with as far as metrics, dealing with the community roundtables that are presenting problematic issues. But as far as what we know of what was going on next door, that was community groups trying to figure out ways of getting better metrics so they have the data and the information that they need and want.
Yeah, my recommendation would be two things, and I think both members of this technical working group hit on it. Number one, keep this as concise as possible for the goal of reducing noise. So I think that's what we're there for, not the window dressing. And number two, I think that we do need some kind of ground-based noise element to it. Because late night, a lot of the noise that I'm hearing is those run-ups that are sitting there, out there on the runways. So, you know, looking at cargo, which, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that's something that's within the metrics that we're already tracking?
Cargo is
Carriers?
considered air carriers, yeah.
Okay, so my recommendation would be, you know, we look at this from a couple different ways. The one key thing that I'm hearing is equitable, so everyone throughout the county is being accounted for. Number two, keeping it as impactful as possible. I mean, it's great if we're gonna do a bunch of different metrics and look at things, but perhaps we shouldn't be boiling the ocean.
No
So-
argument.
Sorry to give you a long roundabout answer, but that would be my recommendation.
I think that's great, and I think that it's very possible then when we start weighting the list of items that are on 1.0 and 2.0, and let's say we're going to take all of those things into consideration in the Fly Quiet program that we're going to be working on, along with ground-based noise issues, and those might be weighted as far as when it comes to overall performance, because, you know, this one item affects 1.2 million residents, and this item may only affect, you know, more limited supply, and so, or is less effective overall. So, you know, I think that when it comes to how you score it, I think it really does, it's gonna need to be some sort of bell curve or weighted kind of thing that airlines can do overall, because if they're bringing in an aircraft that's a quieter aircraft overall under all circumstances, that should be more points because it's consistently bringing us less noise. If they are going out of their way to fly during daytime hours and not late at night, that's a consistent change that they make that can be, you know, overall beneficial across the board if that's how they're setting up their schedule knowingly. So I think some of the things could be weighted more than others. And again, you know, when they're using airplane power instead of shore power, can be a consistent change that is more impactful. So I agree that sort of needs to be looked at it, and I do think that having all these metrics are important. I don't see any metric that is worth throwing out the door right at this moment. But again, how it plays out and how it really can reduce noise is what we're trying to get at.
You know, one of the comments from one of the panels, Bert, was made by yourself in regards to the Fly Quiet program. And my concern is, you know, we're looking at a lot here, right? With 2.0, adding a lot of stuff on. 1.0 already has quite a bit. And, you know, looking at this panel here, it's safe to say that none of us are aviation experts by any means, stretch of the imagination, nor do we play one on TV or anything like that. So I'd be looking to, you know, our consultants over here, yourself, for some guidance where you think that we can make the most impact. I think Paul's comments earlier were really valid. You know, looking at a lot of this, looks great on paper, but at the end of the day, you know, are we hitting our goals here and reducing noise over time? And I think the key word's over time. I'd hate to say, hey, we made a quick improvement within this quarter over here, and then, you know, we lose that improvement over time. Because whatever practices are being instituted by these airlines, that engagement wanes. And we're dependent on that engagement. So I'd look to you guys for some guidance here to kind of help make sure we're not boiling the ocean, keeping it simple as best as possible.
And I mentioned before, one of the things that I ideally would like to do is simplify the report math in and of itself. As I mentioned, the complexities with a gap departure, specific aircrafts, gate every 4 miles, so we're getting a reading every 4 miles, so 4 readings per departure. All those things add up, and then we have to do it for the airline, then do it for the whole group. It's kind of complex. And so if that reporting mechanism blows up, because it's automated right now on the back end, it takes a while to get it fixed. I know, I had to wait 2 years for it to get fixed on our last run. So we used to do it in Excel, and it was just fine, and then we asked for it to be automated, and then it became problems. So anyway, long story short, I think another, if you're looking for other things to add in there, which you mentioned, Chair O'Connell, day and night. We could do a day, evening, night departure grouping, and you could do it based on schedule and then compare what actual was. Those are interesting things, especially when you look at cargo carriers. Not all of them have a departure schedule published, but we definitely do have the departure times, and a lot of those are in the very early hours. The other one that I mentioned before is the preconditioned air and ground power. Airlines want to be on those as soon as possible. It saves them money, bottom line. And also, too, we have airport rules and regulations where we will write them a citation if they don't. I haven't seen any citations on that in a very long time. So I think that might be barking up a fruitless tree there.
So I just wanted to follow through on some of the points that were made that echoed my point earlier. So I was, the reason I was trying to stratify the criteria and see what's going to work, what's effective here, it was more, I probably phrased it wrong, and I think, Chair O'Connell, you made the point about how many people, how many millions of people or hundreds of thousands is it affecting, and that may be a better way to do it, because I can well imagine one of these really, I'll just be selfish here, really helping Woodside, but it affects a tiny number of people. That shouldn't have the same weight of something that's affecting Brisbane and Millbrae and South City, et cetera. I mean, those are like people who are living with a tremendous amount of noise all the time. So my point was more the 80-20 rule. In other words, are there 3 or 4 of these criteria that could really help hundreds of thousands of people instead of the 1 or 2 that help Woodside, which I'm not that interested in? I mean, I'm speaking against self-interest here, but that's my point. Is it's like, what's going to help the most people? And to me, the simpler the better. The last thing that I just wanted to add here, there's a concept I forgot it, I had to look it up here, called Goodhart's Law. Gene, you may be familiar with that, but it's whenever you measure something, it no longer becomes a relevant criteria there. There's lots of examples that are actually kind of funny. But I think that I don't want the airlines to sort of game the system, which is probably easy to do. And maybe the more we have, I don't know if that's the easier to game or the fewer they have that are really relevant. I just don't know. But that's where we need our experts, I think, to really tell us what's going to have the biggest impact for the most number of people. And by the way, the smallest number of categories that will help the most number of people, because I'd rather really focus on 3 or 4 that are going to help millions of people than 13 that are going to just extend that to a few smaller communities that don't matter as much.
No arguments. I will say, don't sell yourself short on the Woodside crossing altitude,
Oh, I know, yeah.
because what's higher over Woodside is higher over the peninsula further down.
I agree. I just, in my, I don't know, 15 years in public life here, you know how many complaints I've had from my community about airport noise? That would be none. It's an easy number for me to remember. I never get them at all. You know how many Steve gets every day? You know,
A lot.
a lot. So I'm a much more sensitive to the communities that are close by than here. Now, by the way, I do know Portola Valley, our sister city, gets a lot. I sort of suspect it's a few people making a lot
Well,
of
if we have
complaints.
the Oceanic come over Woodside,
But I don't get the
turns right
complaints.
and goes down over Palo Alto,
Yeah.
I get those complaints.
Yeah, okay, well, you may see.
So we
I
get a
just
fair
don't.
amount.
So,
But anyway.
so not to say that any of these categories are unimportant. And I
True.
think, for me, it seems that over the years in the technical working group, one of the things that I've seen that is the most impactful is the early turns, the requested early turns, that an airline or a pilot is trying to make up some time or gain some time, and they're requesting that vector. It's not for safety, it's for the reason that they want a highball, and they want to, get back to the barn, wherever they're going, get there on time, make their landing, and move on. And so that has seemed to be one of the really big things that is subjective for the pilot. It is something that they can do with no fuss to call into air traffic control and make that request, and it is generally granted. And I think that's one of the low-hanging fruit that is encompassed in several of these things about not turning early, asking for a specific runway, asking for an early turn. Those are something that I think that the airlines can do something about without spending a lot of money, without doing a lot of legwork, and I think those are the things that are going to be some of the most impactful. Now, again, with what may be going on right now at SFO, they're going to want to be getting out of there because they're already behind time. They're already behind their schedules. They're already been sitting on the ground toe tapping. And are they going to want to request those early turns in the next 6 months? Probably, while this construction's going on. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that's where, for me, what I've overheard that a lot of the noise that, at least on departures, we're getting is the early turns. Now, I don't know if there was a statement in there, but
I just wanted to reiterate what I think I'm hearing is this prioritization of the 13 points. And I think there could be a second prioritization of likelihood of happening. In other words, something that's extremely difficult but very effective may not be our top choice. What we may want is an assessment not just of what we think is going to do the best job, but also the one that is the most likely to happen. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that there is a missing piece from these 13, which is the ground noise, which is what I get the most complaints about. And it happens at specific times late at night. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying, but I want to add that element of something that's very effective, but unlikely is not going to serve us very well.
And also,
True.
too, we need to keep in mind the hour of the day. As you go into the later hours, there are fewer carriers operating, and so not everybody's being graded.
So if I can just jump in, because we are butting up against the full roundtable meeting. So I have taken copious notes, and it sounds like we have at least 5 to 6 items that need to be, a deeper dive needs to be taken into them. I know we have a request for a category related to ground-based noise. What that looks like still needs to be vetted. There's a concept of equity, so, and priority within the metric. So if something has a more universal geographic impact than something that has less of an impact in a smaller geographic area. Considering weights, adding a weighted category scoring system. And then I also have measuring the impact. So that also could be something that's included towards the end of the program. So right now, what we've been doing is a comprehensive review of the program and just going through what the program is and what the categories are. And now we need to shift focus into how effective these actually are and the impact on people. And so, question for the chair.
I would like to jump in and say that while we've recently been having these technical working groups the day of our regular meeting, and so that pushes off whatever results we get down the road 2 months, I think that it might behoove us to have a meeting mid-month, if when staff can get an available time, it wouldn't necessarily need to be in this room. It could be in any room that had Zoom capabilities. I know that Brisbane's willing to host if need be. We've got areas to be able to do it in where we could, have a more intimate conversation about some of the fact-finding. It's probably going to need to be about a month out to give staff and the SFO time to review what we've talked about here. And I think that if we can get staff to coordinate a date that would work, I think that would be the best way to really get something that we can bring back to the roundtable in a timely manner that would be something that we're a product that we're happy to be with. And so I'm hoping that staff can make that happen and come up with a date and give us a doodle poll or whatever to arrange that.
Absolutely.
And just one more final comment. Given if we are going to move forward in this direction and have that meeting in about a month, which I think is an absolute great idea, wherever it may take place, if it's possible to get some kind of draft or some kind of thing publicly published for members of the public so they can weigh in on it as well. So,
Absolutely. We'll make sure that that's included in the packet. And Diane and I will work on getting the meeting scheduled in a time that fits before our mail out for our next June meeting so that we have all the information to notice for everything.
Sure. And we just make sure we have ample time for the public to review
Yes.
it. So,
Is there a Brown Act implication if we need, what do we need to do here? I mean, if one other member of the group, is that acceptable?
So typically what we've done for our subcommittee meetings used to happen at a different date and time than our meeting, than our current roundtable meeting. So what Diane will do is send out a doodle.
You can schedule it and we'll have a meeting a
And
month from now or something.
Yes, exactly. And
But
we'll
I-
schedule it in a time that is,
But if I'm hearing your question right, if you wanted to meet with Stephen personally, I don't think that's a Brown Act violation at all.
as long as it's not a
If
quorum of the members of that committee.
As long as it's
Yeah.
no more than 2, I think you're fine.
3.
So two people.
So 2 people
2
can meet.
people can meet, 3 can't.
I don't want to go to jail.
None of us do.
I'm in enough trouble.
So before we conclude the meeting, staff has direction to schedule another TWG meeting. And then we will go back to the drawing board with SFO. We'll work with Jean to kind of iron out some more of the final details. And then we will get the meeting scheduled.
Okay, and then, let's see, what's on my list to do here?
I think we've taken public comment for the item.
So I guess now we will open the floor for public comments.
We've had public comment on,
For the,
yeah, we did the comments already. We're at the end of the meeting. We're just,
okay, we have done that, and now we've done sort of the member updates. We've done that, and we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
perfect. Thank you.